Chicago's police officers are doing their part in protecting the people of Chicago. For the 4th of July weekend, officers recovered 244 illegal guns. Say that again. Over the 4th of July weekend, officers recovered 244 illegal guns, making 86 arrests for illegal gun possession. In addition, officers cleared 10 murder cases over this past week from July 28th through July 4th. I have a couple of cases that I want to go through real quickly of those murder cases we cleared during this past week. 27-year-old Kalina Nance and 37-year-old Gillespie Indelgado were arrested on July 3rd. 38-year-old Manuel Thompson was arrested on July 2nd. These are all people arrested for murder. And a 16-year-old male, juvenile, was arrested on June 30th, charged with murder. Chicago police officers are doing their part, taking violent offenders off the streets of Chicago. A total of 35 Chicago police officers, have been shot at or shot, adding 2 over the weekend, a commander and a sergeant who were shot. In addition, our follow-up investigations on guns that we recovered, I want to just kind of follow up more on that. We haven't done that much. But notable gun traces. So there was a 9mm Glock 19 that was recovered in Hammond, Indiana in 2021. This one gun was linked to cases in the 5th District, 6th District, and 8th Districts. This same gun, on May 29th, we found shell casings matching this gun from a ShotSpotter call in the 5th District. The same gun on May 23rd, another ShotSpotter call in the 5th District where shell casings matching this gun. On June 3rd, 2020, report of another ShotSpotter casings found matching this gun. Then in February of this year, a homicide in the 8th District where shell casings were recovered after officers responded to a shots fired call and discovered a murder victim, shell casings matching this gun. On February 5th, a homicide in the 8th District on a drive-by shooting of a victim who died with shell casings matching this gun. And finally, March 10th of this year, a shots fired call in Hammond, Indiana, where officers heard shots and discovered a possible scene evidence and weapons. One of the weapons were recovered, and this Glock 19 starts this tracing of these cases that I mentioned. That's one gun recovered that caused this kind of damage to the people of Chicago. A reported 180 people were killed in shooting cases in this country over the July 4th weekend. Homicides in New York City are up 8%. Homicides in Los Angeles are up 24%. Homicides in Houston are up 40%. Homicides in Philadelphia are up 35%. And homicides in Chicago are up 0.56%. Say that again. Homicides in New York are up 8%. Homicides in Los Angeles are up 24%. Homicides in Houston are up 40%. That's 40%. Homicides in Philadelphia are up 35%. And homicides in Chicago are up 0.56%. Chicago police officers are doing their part. No one else would do the brave and courageous work that the men and women of the police department in Chicago are doing every day. There are too many violent offenders and too little consequences in our courts. There are too many illegal guns in our city and too little consequences in the courts. And finally, I will say this: the brave men and women of this police department here in Chicago, I am truly proud of their efforts over the weekend. They literally risked life and limb over this weekend for what was an extremely challenging weekend in this country for American policing. Um, I'm going to brief one other case, and then I'm going to have Chief of Detectives Brendan Deanahan come brief from an investigative standpoint some of the ongoing cases from the weekend. So the one case I do want to brief is the case that happened at the W Hotel on July 4th at 6:45 p.m. and the location was 644 North Lake Shore Drive. We had reports from an employee of the hotel of a rifle and handgun in a very suspicious position inside one of the rooms. We responded and arrested a Keegan, that's Keegan, Castile, Casteel, for aggravated UUW. And there was also a handgun along with the rifle and 5 rifle magazines on the windowsill of this particular room. Our Joint Terrorism Task Force officers debriefed, interviewed this person along with a companion, and we are continuing this investigation. The circumstances are this. The employee alerted us. We made contact with this person, made the arrest, began interviews, and we are also conducting gun tracing of both the rifle and the handgun for further investigation. There's no previous criminal history of this person, nor any other issues in our federal databases, but obviously very concerning given the position of the W Hotel to Navy Pier. With that, we'll turn it over to Bureau Detective Chief Brendan Deanahan for investigative updates for ongoing cases that occurred over the July 4th weekend. Brendan.
Good morning. So I'm going to go over a couple of quick updates. I know you guys probably have some questions on multiple other incidents, which I'll try to answer, and then turn it back over to the soup. So on the 4th of July at about 4:30 p.m. at 117th and Normal, we had a 5-year-old that was shot. That 5-year-old was shot in the right leg in good condition. That was the incident where there was a dog out there and there was a dog bite on the child, and somebody came out and discharged a firearm in order to basically scare the dog or remove the dog from the scene, and the child was accidentally struck. So the mother took the child to the hospital. The child's in good condition, and it's still an active and ongoing investigation. We didn't get a lot of cooperation on who discharged the firearm on the scene, so the detectives are still working on it, but the child is in good condition. And then on the 5th of July at 1 in the morning at 118 East 119th Place, we had a 6-year-old child that was shot. That child was shot in the right hand. That one was a drive-by shooting where the mother and daughter are watching fireworks outside. Car drives by, discharges the firearm. Child is struck, and the child is in good condition. I know there were several other incidents where children were shot. We had the baby shot in the mass shooting incident, the 1-month-old. That child is still in critical condition, and I'm kind of deferring to the doctors on the progress of that baby and what's going to happen. But still in critical condition, but the child is still alive. We had another incident where an 8-year-old was shot in the head. I think that was on Thursday going into the weekend. And for that one as well, I know the child has a feeding tube, extremely critical condition with a gunshot wound to the head, but that child is still alive as well. There was another shooting incident at 61st and Wabash that where multiple people were shot, and we had 2, I believe they were 13-year-olds. They were also struck by gunfire. And in that incident, there was a large gathering and fireworks that were being shot off when a car drove past and shot into that crowd. And then people from that crowd returned fire at that vehicle. and these two children were struck. Don't have any major detective leads on that right now. The detectives are following up on all these investigations, but those two 13-year-olds are also in stable condition at this time. Are there any other questions regarding specific investigations that I may be able to speak about? No, the superintendent already addressed the W case, and the detectives, I'm talking more about the shootings and the murders. And obviously, we had a commander that was shot in the foot over the weekend as well. The detectives are following up on that case. We do have some video evidence that is helping direct the investigation, but obviously still very open and active as well. Sure. So I guess to answer your question, we'll just, I guess it's just a rumor, and that did not occur. We have verifiable, objective evidence that shows a person discharging a firearm, and that's when the commander gets struck. So I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter, I guess, where it happened or where the rumors may be coming from. But no, the commander and the sergeant that were out there. Like I said, we have verifiable evidence, someone discharging a firearm in their direction, and that's when they get struck. Correct. And I think if we're going to be reasonable, it was a large crowd, and in today's world with people videoing police officers with cell phones, if an officer was waving a gun around and it discharged in front of a large crowd, for that kind of time frame, I mean, I think if we're just being reasonable, the citizens that were out there would have been videoing that and talking to us about it right away. So anyway, that is it's unfortunate that rumor's out there, but no, we have evidence to support, and we're looking for the individual who discharged the firearm. I'll get back to you on that one. I don't have an update on the investigation. Once again, yeah, just a pretty tragic incident. I know the detectives up there were following up on that investigation, and last time I spoke with that specific area, they did have some good leads that they were following up on, but pretty active and ongoing, and just unfortunately, just one of the tragic incidents over the weekend. We'll get you that total. I don't have it in front of me, but we'll get you that total from from whatever time frame that you guys are looking for. Just get with our news affairs afterwards, and we'll get you that answer. So, due to the fact that that is a very active investigation, I have some details that I'm just not ready to release at this time. Obviously, we know that he was struck by a stray bullet, and the detectives are following up, but I'm not prepared to release the investigation and investigative leads at this time.
I can take that real briefly, if you don't mind, unless you have some other investigative questions for Chief of Detective Dinahan. I'll just take the rest of the questions unless you have more for him. I'll take this one, but you have more for him, I'll wait. More for him? Okay, great. I'll just stay here. That question, over 60 arrests were made over the weekend, specifically at downtown incident where a lot of young people came downtown. Things got out of hand. We began making arrests, and so we ended up with about 60 young people arrested for various charges. We didn't have any that I'm aware of at this point. We're still processing a lot of those reports, but right now we don't have any illegal gun possession arrests for that specific incident. Oh, I think he was first, then I'll come to you. Yeah. So the reason why I went through what's happening in other cities is to kind of get you all some context compared to what's happening in Chicago. So again, I'll run through it again, but effectiveness obviously is measured in, are we moving the needle at all in this year compared to last year? Are we comparative across what's happening in the country as it relates to violence? It's a violent crime wave in this country that has been going on, carried over from 2020. So again, New York City is up 8%, LA is up 24% in homicides, Houston is up 40%. And again, we get into this conversation about effectiveness. We can take guns off the street. We can charge people with murder. But again, I want to ask you a question in this gallery. How many people think it's okay to have over 90 people on electronic monitoring that we've charged with murder released back to our communities? Just show of hands, who think that's a good idea? For the record, no one raised their hands in the media gallery and thought it was a good idea to release over 90 people. So let me finish my answer to your question. Let me finish my. Can I finish my answer to the question? You get to ask the question. I know. Let me finish my answer to the question. The fact that over 90 people charged with murder have been released by our courts back into the community does two things. Number one, it creates this idea of lawlessness for people in the community who know someone murdered someone, and yet they see him again the following days as if nothing happened. Secondly, because these people murdered someone, the victim and their associates retaliate indiscriminately on where they are. So whether they're in a car with their kids, whether they're in a large crowd gathering, they are the targets for retaliation. So now you've created, the courts, when I say you, the courts have created an unsafe environment for large crowd gatherings because you've released people charged with murder back into these same communities where they committed this heinous crime. So my question, again, it's rhetorical because it's really to the people of Chicago who probably are not likely understanding the impacts of releasing people charged with murder back into the community. These are people charged with murder where the state's attorney accepted the charges. So I hear a lot about what the state's attorney is doing. She charged these people with murder that we brought before them, that we've arrested. And the courts released them back into the community, creating an unsafe environment for all of us in the crowd when retaliation occurs, when street justice occurs. So when you ask the question whether or not our work is effective, Chicago police officers are doing their job by arresting people and charging them with murder. That's doing our part. And what's happening in the courts is creating this unsafe environment for all of us. So yes, follow up. So we are doing more of everything in an unprecedented historical way. So we're at 6,100 guns recovered. That's an unprecedented pace. We are at over 50% clearance rates on homicides. That's the highest in years of clearance rates. We are, over the weekend alone, we arrested over 80 people charged with violent crimes. So my point is, number one, this issue of the Loyola study has been disputed by others. I think your own paper has published articles disputing the fact that people who are violent that are released back to the community don't create more violence. There's not a Bible or final product. There's a dispute amongst the research community whether or not those facts, that same study is true. I could point you to another study that says that Loyola study is not true. That's not my job to go and do your job. I mean, you said you guys are quick to say that's not our job, and I'm quick to say, yeah, but this is not my job to challenge. I just want you to keep the same energy in bond court when these violent people are released back to our communities, creating a unsafe environment to be in a crowd, in the drive-through of a McDonald's, anywhere in the community when these people are targeted for retaliation. It's not whether or not they commit other crimes. That's also something in dispute, but it's also people who are targeted that have killed other people by associates, criminal networks of the victim. Now I'm just standing next to this person who's targeted and I get shot or my child gets shot. That's the unsafe environment that this out of control courts principle or whatever it is creating. It's unsafe to release violent people in a community that has a high level of retaliation back into community and then be surprised that people shoot at targeting these people. She hadn't asked a question, so can we let her ask? She hadn't asked one. We have agreed with all of that, and we have talked about our whole of government approach ad nauseum for several weeks now, and so that's nothing new. We agree with all the holistic whole of government approaches. But each Monday, if I'm the only person answering questions about violence in Chicago, we likely won't be in that place of discussing what other things can others do. Others are never at this podium with us talking about what we're doing. So we don't disagree with the holistic approach. That's the whole of government approach that the mayor rolled out. But again, no one would do the job that Chicago police officers do right now. No one would weigh into large crowds and risk being shot. No one would do that job right now. No one would go down these dark alleys that these officers go down. So I want all of us to acknowledge the bravery and courage it takes to do this job, to stand up to violence. And only our officers are doing this right now. Bring on the other parts of the holistic approach. We welcome all of that help. We are part of those programs. We are pushing that agenda of the whole of government. But again, the Chicago Police Department and its officers are doing their job, and they're doing their job in historically unprecedented ways. Yes. So we're not looking for fairness. We just want to, number one, acknowledge the hard work of our officers. Number two, I think we'd like to put some of the things that's happening across this country in context as best you all can, as well as I want to keep our officers encouraged that the people of Chicago really appreciate their work during challenging weekends like the one we just experienced. He had. So I don't think dissent in a democracy is finger pointing. I think a public debate in the public square is quite appropriate in the way our government is you know positions. How democracy works, particularly local democracy, it's public debate that gets us to a better place. So finger pointing is your words that you use. I'm bringing a debate about, do we continue to release violent people in our courts into these communities? and see that the targeting of violent people who are released back creates an unsafe environment for all of us? Do we continue that? That's a public debate that's not finger pointing. I think it's appropriate, and maybe it changes what the courts do. I think people should hear this. This is not finger pointing. You can call it finger pointing all you want. I can't write and report for you, but this is a worthwhile debate here and in all places throughout the country that's having a similar debate about what the courts are doing, particularly in urban centers in our country, and what the results are. And if the cops' productivity was down and not unprecedentedly high, I would be arguing we need to do more as police officers, that we need to get more guns off the street, that we need to arrest more violent people. That's not the case here. Cops hadn't stopped working. They haven't. They actually are working just this weekend alone. I'm going to make just one point. 244 guns were recovered by Chicago police officers. Just this weekend. Chicago police officers are doing their part. Yes, I'm sorry, you want to follow up.
Yes, I want to follow up. He was
The fact that the employee was aware enough to, number one, we haven't been having a lot of hotel service because of COVID. If you all have traveled any at all, changing out the tiles, and it hadn't happened that much. So this was unique that, we're still within COVID restrictions somewhat, and this employee saw something by entering the room to clean it that likely prevented a tragedy from happening. So it's significant and very valuable, and we ought to, heap a lot of praise on that employee for being aware and letting us know so we could react quickly and potentially avoid a tragedy. Yes. So again, we're limited in our strategy because we're not judge, jailer, or juror. We can only do that part of it. The success, I'm answering your question. You got to quit interrupting. So, strategy wise, we did our part. The outcome of a safer weekend is the criminal justice system, which includes the courts. So, if the courts are continuing to release violent people we arrest, the outcomes of our strategy are less effective than they could be if they hold violent offenders and people found in possession of illegal guns. If they held those people with consequences, real consequences that change behavior, we're only one part of this formula of safety. We are law enforcement, but we can't be a juror or a jurist and sit on the court and mete out justice. So the justice system is in parts in our democracy. That the law enforcement does their part, and we're doing our part at a high level, I would argue at the highest level, given the data we give you every week. The other part of the formula to be effective is going to be what the courts do with violent offenders. He was starting to talk before you came up. We gave proof in the council meeting. That was 6 hours of proof. We yeah. Yeah, we went through that, and we can go through that again for you, but we keep a running total of people. For example, over the weekend, as I mentioned, we made some arrests for violent crime. 2 of those were on electronic monitoring. We mentioned in the council meeting that 7-year-old Jason Adams, who was with her father at the McDonald's drive-thru when offenders came and shot and killed her, targeting her father, one of those shooters was on electronic monitoring. We said this in the city council meeting. I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it until the public reacts to what the courts are doing. They're making us all less safe by releasing violent offenders, often who commit crime and or no one disputes the retaliatory nature of our criminals. No one disputes that. You ask me for proof. No one disputes that there's a high level of street justice in Chicago. And you don't need me to report that. You have case after case after case that we bring every week where we say the person shot wasn't targeted. They were targeting a person who was involved in crime, and this innocent bystander was shot. We say that weekend after weekend. You have your proof. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Last question. We have rolled out our big swing at community policing several weeks ago. Obviously, we have in the past been restricted by COVID, large gathering restrictions, but we are no longer restricted as much as we were. And so we're doing all of the community engagements that we were doing, including beat meetings in person now. We were virtual, block club meetings in person now. Myself and the mayor have been out each weekend engaging the community, as well as everyone that will meet with us, not just the formal meetings, but we've been showing up to several events out in the community. And I think that's part of our strategy to engage the community. But again, our strategies are one part of the effectiveness of the criminal justice system in changing behavior of violent offenders. If the other part, the courts, are not meting out justice that changes behavior, meaning more serious consequences for illegal gun possession and violent offenders, that's where the outcomes are, in my opinion, deficient. The fourth branch of government, the media, will change it. Why? Thomas Jefferson said, I'd rather have media and no government than government and no media. It's going to be the fourth branch of government that changes what happens in the courts. Thank you all very much. Yeah, so we are not alone in this effort to try to have an impact on young people's behavior when they come downtown. We are partnering with CPS staff. They are downtown with us during these times when overnight the kids come down, along with our street outreach. So we have had some success. Obviously, much more challenging this weekend given all of what else was going on over the weekend. But we have to continue to try and engage more and more people. I would ask the faith community to come on board, and others in the community that have nonprofits that have a positive influence on young people, come on board. We'll integrate you into our strategy. It is a evening to early morning strategy, so many people will have to adjust their hours, but we are collaborating with Chicago Public Schools staff and street outreach. And obviously this weekend was much more challenging than previous weekends have been, but we, again, want to expand our footprint of who else is involved in helping us corral these young people. But again, make no mistake, when the law is broken, we're going to enforce the law. We arrested 60 young people, and we're there to enforce the law and change this behavior, but we much rather others influence young people rather than us end up having to enforce the law and put them in jail and starting their criminal record. So that's the last question. Thank you all. So, I'm sorry, yeah, you didn't get a question. Last one. Thanks. Yeah, I think that's one of the things. I'm glad you asked that we obviously need to recruit and retain our officers. The sentiment about policing makes it much more challenging than it's been in the past. But we are encouraged that we got to put together a dedicated recruiting team with a ground game. We've never had that before here in Chicago, as well as offering more in-person tests than we've been able to because of COVID last year. We weren't able to offer any in-person tests last year because of COVID restrictions on room capacity size. So we'll be asking for 2 of those tests in person, and then we'll have 2 additional online test opportunities, which is a new feature in offering tests. We've got to really have a sense of urgency around recruiting because retentions continue to be a challenge as we go forward. Thank you all so very much. It was in the window seal. I think we said that. In the window seal, I think we said that. Yes. Laying in the window seal. Thank you all so much. Thank you.